Yes? Signal for tonight, is it?
Everyone knows Fawlty Towers. 12 episodes, one hotel, the most perfectly constructed sitcom Britain ever produced. But Basil Fawlty himself, the rage, the snobbery, the spectacular self-destruction, hides a stranger and darker story than most fans ever realised. These are the things you never knew about the man behind the mayhem. Fact 1. Cleese almost played someone else.
I am the owner of Fawlty Towers, and may I welcome your war, you war.
Before Basil Fawlty took shape, John Cleese had been developing a very different character for television, a quietly sinister civil servant who operated through bureaucratic cruelty rather than explosive rage. The BBC had shown interest in that concept.
Well, may I ask what you were expecting to see out of a Torquay hotel bedroom window?
But the memory of the Torquay hotel manager kept pulling him back. The explosive, self-defeating hotelier felt more alive than anything he had sketched on paper.
You told me to shut up!
No, he told me to shut up.
What tipped the decision was a conversation with Connie Booth, who argued that a character defined by suppressed fury, a man who believed he deserved far better than his life had given him, had more comic range than cold menace. That reframing was crucial. Basil was not simply rude, he was a man consumed by the gap between who he thought he was and what he actually was. The comedy came from that gap, played out in real time. The civil servant character was quietly shelved and never developed further. Without that conversation with Booth, British television might have received a very different and considerably less beloved creation.
He's pickled the onions and he's smashed the eggs in his cups under the table.
Fact 2. Basil's class obsession was personal.
You didn't let me put something on, really. Realise how much we would have won? £75 for a £5 steak? Still, you know best.
Basil Fawlty's relentless snobbery, his desperate need to impress the wealthy, his contempt for anyone he considered beneath him, his resentment at being trapped in trade, was not simply a comic device. It drew directly on John Cleese's own complicated relationship with the British class system. Cleese has spoken in interviews about growing up in a household where class anxiety was ever present. His parents were intensely preoccupied with social respectability. He absorbed that world in childhood and spent much of his adult life trying to understand it. Basil was his most sustained examination of what that anxiety does to a person. A man so consumed by who he wants to be that he cannot function as who he actually is. Every scene where Basil fawns over a perceived aristocrat and sneers at a working-class guest is rooted in something Cleese had observed at close range. The comedy is precise because the observation was personal. Cleese has said he found Basil both funny and genuinely frightening. He recognised too much of a certain England in him.
Just turn left out of the gate and straight on, and it's on your right.
Fact 3. The name was nearly different.
Come on.
Not do this, we're too tired.
Is somebody coming?
Mr. Fawlty, I don't want to work here anymore.
Basil Fawlty almost had a different name entirely. During the early development of the show, Cleese and Booth worked through several alternatives before settling on the one that became iconic. Among the names considered were Gervais Manor and Clifford Tower, both carrying the same vague suggestion of faded gentility that the writers wanted for the character. Booth favoured something that sounded simultaneously pompous and slightly ridiculous.
Fawlty? What's wrong with it?
I'm the manager!
The word Fawlty emerged from a desire to have the name itself do comic work. It suggested fault, failure, and a kind of structural instability, qualities that describe Basil perfectly without needing to be stated. The name announced the character before he had spoken a word. Basil was chosen partly because it sounded expensive and slightly absurd, and partly because Cleese liked the way it felt to shout.
Does that stir any memories in you, Basil?
Memories? Agincourt?
Basil Fawlty, when delivered at full volume, had a rhythm that suited the character's mode of address. It seems obvious in retrospect. Most good character names do, but the alternative versions offer a glimpse of how differently the show might have landed with a less perfectly chosen identity at its centre.
The Major tried to kill Basil.
Kill Basil?
No, not Mr. Fawlty. I mean Basil, my little...
Ratatouille.
Fact 4. Sybil was written as equal.
What's that on your hand, Basil?
What? Oh, that's some stuff in the cupboard, dear. Something I knocked over.
One of the less discussed aspects of Fawlty Towers is how deliberately Cleese and Booth constructed Sybil as Basil's intellectual and practical superior in almost every respect.
What? Anniversary of the Battle of Agincourt?
This was not an accident of performance. It was built into the scripts from the beginning. Booth was insistent that Sybil should never be a victim. She understood Basil completely, had long assessed his limitations, and had decided that managing him was preferable to the alternatives. Her control of the hotel and of him was total. The dynamic subverted the standard sitcom marriage of the era, in which the wife was typically the exasperated but ultimately subordinate figure.
Thought I'd better apologise for my husband's behaviour.
No, please, really, Mrs. Fawlty.
Sybil exasperated nobody. She was the stable centre around which Basil's chaos revolved. Booth pushed back on early drafts where Sybil was more reactive. She wanted a woman who acted, not one who merely responded. The result is one of British comedy's most quietly radical marriages. Basil may be the star of the show, but Sybil is the reason the hotel still has walls.
What were you doing up that ladder?
Come on, I was trying to see the girl. Is that so strange? Stop hitting me.
Fact 5. Cleese rehearsed Basil's rage scientifically.
There is a woman in that room that Johnson smuggled in last night, right? That's the woman I've been trying to get hold of.
John Cleese approached Basil's volcanic temper not as an emotional performance, but as a technical problem to be solved. He was deeply interested in the mechanics of anger, specifically in the way that rage escalates in stages, each one more irrational than the last. He studied this progression carefully before filming, mapping out the beats of a Basil meltdown the way a composer would map a crescendo. The first stage is controlled irritation. The second is visible effort to suppress it. The third is the collapse. And then the spiral into full, uncontrolled fury.
Mother Johnson, come out, wherever you are. How do you do? Are you enjoying your stay?
What made the performances so effective was that Cleese never skipped stages. Audiences could see exactly where Basil was in each meltdown, which made the escalation funnier than if the rage had simply appeared at full force. He also studied the aftermath, the way Basil would collect himself with enormous dignity after complete loss of control, behaving as though nothing had happened. That transition from screaming chaos to wounded composure was rehearsed as precisely as the outburst itself. Comedy writers who have studied the show point to this structural precision as the key to why Basil's rages never feel repetitive, despite occurring in almost every episode. The stages are the same. The trigger is always different.
Who needs Harold Robbins when you got the real thing?
How long have you been married, Mrs. Fawlty?
Oh, since 1485.
Fact 6. The hotel layout was impossible.
Not my eggs, the sausages.
Oh, sorry.
He might pull it too, you see.
Viewers who watch Fawlty Towers carefully notice that the hotel's internal geography does not behave consistently. Rooms that should be adjacent are mysteriously distant. Staircases appear and disappear. The kitchen's relationship to the reception desk shifts between scenes. This was not an oversight. The studio set was designed to serve the comedy rather than architectural logic. If a scene required Basil to burst through a door unexpectedly, the door was placed where the comedy needed it.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Cleese actively resisted suggestions that the geography be made more coherent. He argued the hotel existed as a psychological space as much as a physical one, a place where normal rules of cause and effect were already suspended. Set designers described it as one of the more unusual briefs they had received. They were asked to build spaces that felt real in the moment, but made no claim to consistency across episodes. Attentive fans have mapped the inconsistencies for decades. The hotel floor plan, drawn accurately from the episodes, would be architecturally impossible. Cleese, when informed of this, reportedly said it sounded about right.
He's dead. Dead? Who? Number 8. Lehman? But Basil just took him his breakfast.
Fact 7. Polly held the show together.
I can't say no.
In the architecture of Fawlty Towers, Polly served a function that is easy to overlook but impossible to remove. She was the only character who operated in full possession of reality, who understood the situation clearly, could see exactly where it was heading, and was powerless to stop it.
There's a hair in my mousse.
Well, don't talk too loud. Everybody will want one.
What?
Connie Booth wrote the character with that specific dramatic function in mind. Polly needed to be intelligent enough that the audience trusted her, and trapped enough that her intelligence could not rescue anyone. Her competence made Basil's catastrophes more painful, not less.
I'm just a girl who can't say no. I'm in a terrible fix.
Booth has said in interviews that Polly was the character she understood most instinctively, which is perhaps not surprising given that she was also the show's co-writer, watching the same chaos unfold from the outside. The scenes that work hardest in the series are often the ones where Polly's face tells the audience exactly what is about to go wrong, several seconds before it happens. That anticipatory horror, watching a disaster arrive in slow motion, is a specific comedic pleasure that Booth engineered precisely.
What are you doing, Polly? Just preparing some sausages. Bangers a la bang.
Without Polly grounding the show in something sane, Basil's world would have felt like pure cartoon. It is her presence that makes the hotel feel like a real place where unreal things keep happening.
I'll call O'Reilly.
Fact 8. Cleese feared becoming Basil.
Is that he was small and had a very large hen-pecking wife. And obviously we couldn't find anyone much bigger than me, so we decided to reverse that.
In several interviews across his career, John Cleese has spoken about a specific anxiety that the character of Basil Fawlty raised for him, the fear of recognition. Not that audiences would recognise him in the role, but that he would recognise himself.
So final, isn't it? Basil. Well, wouldn't you say it was final, dear? I'd say it was pretty bloody final.
Cleese has described Basil as a portrait of a particular psychological trap. The belief that the world has failed to properly reward your worth, combined with an inability to examine whether that belief is actually justified. He found that trap uncomfortably familiar. He has said he understood Basil's rage not as an alien emotion, but as a version of feelings he had experienced and learned over many years of therapy to manage.
I'll stand there and ask them if they want something to drink before the war. Before their lunch.
The character was a cautionary figure for him as much as a comic one. This gives certain scenes in the show an edge that pure farce would not have. When Basil is at his most humiliated, when every scheme has collapsed and every pretension has been stripped away, Cleese is not just performing, he's examining something. The character ran for 12 episodes and then stopped. Cleese has never fully explained why he could not continue beyond that point. But the answer may have something to do with how close to home Basil had always been.
So next week's a definite then, is it? Oh, good. Well, that'll be nice, won't it? I mean, we waited for that ball about as long as Hadrian.
Fact 9. Scripts were timed to the second.
Ah, there's the front doorbell. Somebody's got back late.
Yes.
I expect they got to get their passkey.
I know.
The scripts for Fawlty Towers were written with a level of timing precision unusual even by the standards of meticulously crafted television comedy.
The door was here.
Where,
Cleese and Booth did not simply write jokes. They engineered sequences in which the placement of each line, pause and reaction was calculated to produce maximum effect. They read drafts aloud repeatedly, counting beats and measuring silences. If a joke landed half a second too late, the scene was rewritten. If a response came too quickly, it was held back. The rhythm of each exchange was treated as seriously as the content. Directors working on the show described the scripts as being more like musical scores than conventional television writing. There was little room for interpretation. The timing was written in.
Manuel Towers, how are you? It's nice today. Good. Goodbye.
Actors were given very specific guidance on pace that left minimal space for instinct. Some found this constraining. The more experienced cast understood that the constraints were the point, that the comedy required a precision that natural performance alone could not reliably deliver. Viewers never perceived this architecture consciously. They simply noticed the show is very funny and that it remains funny across dozens of rewatches. The hidden engineering is the reason. Comedy that looks effortless rarely is.
About 6 months. He used to work at Dorchester.
At the Dorchester?
No, in Dorchester, about 40 miles away.
Fact 10. Basil was never meant to win.
Excuse me, we'll have 2 singles then, if that's all right with the police.
2 singles, certainly. Now,
Next to each other.
From the very first episode, Basil Fawlty was designed to fail. Not occasionally, not tragically, but completely and without exception. Every scheme collapses, every deception unravels, every attempt to assert himself ends in humiliation. This was not a story structure that emerged over time. It was the premise. Cleese and Booth made a fundamental decision early in the development of the show. Basil would never be rewarded. Not with success, not with respect, not with a single scene in which his self-image was confirmed. The world of the hotel would perpetually refuse to accommodate his delusions. This is an unusually punishing format for a central character, and it required careful handling to prevent the audience from simply losing patience with him.
Thank you very much.
The solution was to ensure that Basil's failures were always, at some level, deserved, that his schemes were undone by the same flaws that made him sympathetic. Audiences stayed with him not because they expected him to win, but because they recognized the particular quality of his losing. The gap between Basil's self-image and his reality is one that almost everyone has experienced in some form. He loses in the specific way that pride always loses. 12 episodes, no victories, and one of the most beloved characters in the history of British television. It turns out that watching someone fail magnificently, with total conviction and no self-awareness, is one of comedy's most enduring pleasures. Basil Fawlty never wins. Not once, not ever, and somehow that makes him one of the, most watchable characters in British television history. Because there is something in that magnificent, relentless failure that most of us recognise a little too well. If this one got under your skin, hit subscribe, leave a comment below, and I will see you in the next one.